Hello, and welcome to the Voices of the Australian Alumni, a brand new podcast series presented by the Australian Consulate General in Mumbai. I am your host, Tejas Nair, a proud Australian alumnus, culture entrepreneur, and a new media artist. With this series, we hope to shine a light on successful Australian alumni, learn about how they have adopted to the new normal, and discuss the future for the sectors in which they operate. Our first guest on the series is Samara Mahindra, founder of Carer, India's first integrative oncology startup that provides personalized healthcare to patients. With more than 8 years of experience in the industry, she is certified in physical rehabilitation, cancer exercise therapy, and breast cancer recovery. Samara is certified in fitness instructor training from the American Academy of Personal Training, holds qualifications from the Cancer Exercise Training Institute in Portland, and went on to do her master's in corporate communication from Bond University in Australia. Hi, Samara. How's it going?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. How are you, Tejas?
Most welcome. I'm doing very good. So, just to sort of start off on the right note, could you maybe share a short introduction with the listeners about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I've always been someone who would be, who's always very interested in health and wellness. I knew I would get into this space. I had the pleasure of, studying in UK and then moving to Australia. And from there, I moved back to India. And I knew that I would step into the space of at least lifestyle and wellness. But unfortunately, at that time, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and, lived beside her for many years as a caregiver. Post her demise, I decided to really dive into the space of healthcare. So I moved to the US and, studied medicine from scratch, actually. I trained as, a cancer exercise specialist, then went into breast cancer recovery training. I learned about nutrition and I was exposed to this world of integrative oncology, which is nothing but using lifestyle management therapies to improve the outcome of a cancer patient. I realized that my mother didn't have access to this, and we didn't even know that something like this existed in India. And I decided then to move back to India and start something similar. And that's when my journey with Carer began, and this was about 5 years ago.
Wow. And can you tell us a bit about your time in Australia?
Sure. So I moved to Australia to do, in fact, I was doing my bachelor's in the UK, and then halfway through I transferred to Australia. My sister was already studying in Bond University, and she used to, I had no plans of going to Australia. I thought I'd move back to India, but she really coaxed me into coming to Australia. She said, you have to come in, really experience what it's all about. And I then moved to Australia and I did, I think, every degree possible to remain in Australia because I didn't want to leave after that. I had Bond University is a beautiful university because it's a very small personal university. Everyone more or less knows everyone else. And my experience in Australia was, it was extremely liberating actually because there was my opportunity to find independence, was my opportunity to learn and educate myself about certain things that I had the freedom to learn about certain things that that I wanted to learn and do classes of the same. The whole experience of Australia, I always tell people this, that Australia itself is a world of its own. Everyone's just very laid back and we had a fabulous apartment. We lived right next to university. I got the opportunity to meet multiple people from different backgrounds, and it really was a melting pot of cultures. And like I said, everyone was very personal. It was literally a university where we would go surfing and then come to class, and that's the kind of vibe that Bond created for us. And to be very honest with you, the friends that I made in Australia still remain very, very close to my heart till date. So, just an experience of a lifetime, actually.
Amazing. And how long has it been since you moved back from Australia?
It must be about a good 7 years now, 7, 8 years.
Wow. Wow. And do you also get to travel back often?
I did. I went back about once or twice, and of course things have changed and evolved. But it still remains. I lived on the Gold Coast, so it's literally a surfer's paradise. And yeah, memories came back, and it was still as wonderful as before.
Amazing, amazing. That's amazing to hear. Speaking of change and evolution, I'm curious. You mentioned that when your mother was going through what she went through, the circumstances in the healthcare sort of space were very different, and it's obviously been quite some time now, and you've also been involved in the space actively. Can you give us a sense on where we are at right now? Obviously, the last year puts a lot more into context, but generally in the last few years, how would you say things have sort of evolved in the space?
So let's put it this way. So in the last year, I mean, not taking this year into consideration, because the kind of change we've experienced this year is what we would experience in 10 years put together in one, right? But previous to that, I could just speak from the point of view of a caregiver and my mother being diagnosed with cancer. There was a very, very high dependency on the medical fraternity and doctors. We literally would just follow suit of what doctors said, wouldn't question, and just went with almost epitomizing a doctor as God, right? But today it's very different, because I feel patients and caregivers are much more educated. They are much more evolved in their thinking. They want to be actively involved in their treatment and their recovery, and they ask questions. So whether it's with us, whether it's with doctors, in fact, so much so that there is a large percentage of people who are also skeptical now, and it's called doctor shopping, where they don't really take the first opinion of a doctor. They will always take the second and third. And so that has been the biggest change that I have experienced personally, in terms of just the perception and understanding of healthcare and how people are towards it today, in comparison.
Interesting. So, in terms of the space, obviously things have evolved leaps and bounds, and the last year, like you said, has been huge in terms of the kind of dependencies we've now found on the medical sector. In your personal practice, how do you think the last year has, both from a business perspective as well as a practice, what has changed, and how have you and your team maybe adapted to these new circumstances?
So for us, there's been a radical change. We used to be a healthcare company that delivered services on ground at a patient's home. So we would send our therapists into the patient's home, and we would, deliver the service in that manner. We have completely transformed into a digital company. We provide all our services through teleconsulting and video consulting, and everything is done through an online platform, which has been a massive change for us because of just the way that patients. So one is obviously service delivery. Second is the adoption of these therapies through an online platform. There was a very massive, you know, reluctance to actually take these therapies, because cancer patients wanted the touch and feel of another therapist, by their side. But with once COVID hit, we had to inevitably had to move everything online, and that made a major change, and people were open to that. So today, for us, we become a complete digital company. We had more than 60, 70 therapists on ground, actually even touching 100 at one point all over India. Today, we don't even have one. So that's a massive, massive change for us. And it has given us an opportunity to reach out to a larger audience. Now, we're not only working with tier one and tier twos in India, but we work with a lot of international patients as well. So that's been a very big change for us.
That's amazing. Now I'm curious, your time in Australia, obviously you were there for a master's in corporate communications, but just Australia as a country also has its own culture of health and lifestyle and medicine, and which is quite different, of course, from India. But I think the gaps between these sort of country specific cultures are also closing in as we move forward. How would you say that your time in Australia and your networks, possibly your education, how have all of these things sort of played a role in carer and the work you do now?
So with Australia, just the culture itself, they have a very active lifestyle. See, I saw one part of Australia. I lived on the Gold Coast, right? So I lived in a place where everyone was out and about on the beach, surfing, active. You know, we spent our holidays, doing some kind of activity. So that was the culture that I was exposed to, and that was ingrained in me in Australia. And even the kind of college friends that I had, it was all very activity based. So that culture itself is very inclined towards health and wellness. Along with that, the field that I'm involved in, which is integrative oncology, is one of the most evolved fields present in Australia. So they have some of the best integrative oncology units in Australia. So they're already leaps and bounds ahead with what we're doing. So when I came back to India, I already had that exposure to health, wellness ingrained in me through my experience in Australia and through the friends that that I had and the lifestyle that I led over there. And obviously, through that, I had also exposed myself to this world of integrative oncology, but not really knowing exactly what it was till I actually studied it in the US and then decided to come back to India to start the same. So there was already, an exposure towards this kind of lifestyle and health when I had started in India.
Cool. Yeah. And I noticed that you'd started this really interesting content series called hashtag Samara Sets. I wanted to know a little bit more about, where that came from.
So they just, a lot of people tell me, it's so noble the work that you do, and it's amazing because you help a lot of people. And it's a passion, and I love it, and I understand what goes into something like this. But if you were to truly ask me where my, really the core of my passion lies, is education. Really, honestly, I feel like if I need to make a change in this world, it is through education. Now, I always looked at what I was doing and how do I move in that direction. And I realized the biggest misfortune in cancer care around the world is just the lack of education and information about it. There is such misconstrued perceptions about what cancer is. I mean, even to the degree where I even talk to a friend and they don't really know what the meaning of cancer is. And that embeds a very strong fear, and the fear comes from a lack of knowledge. That's basically what it is. So I realized that, and with my passion towards education, I said, how do I use the information that I have to teach people about what really cancer is and about what you can do to improve your lifestyle and decrease your rates of cancer, because today cancer is more or less a lifestyle disease. So if I can tell you certain things you can do to decrease your chances of getting cancer, or if you have cancer, it's really in your control, and there are certain things you can do to even recover from it, then let's spend that time actually talking about it. And that's when the whole concept of Samara Says was born, because we said, how do we use a digital platform and video content to spread information in a light way, because we're talking about some heavy information over here. So and that's when we said, let's talk about topics that is relevant to people and that makes sense and understandable to people, uh, and things that they can do, like actual actionable steps that they can take in order to learn about cancer and what they can do in their lives to decrease that risk or improve the outcomes of cancer. And so Samara Says really is a passion project which is taking me in the direction of education and to just disseminate good information and content to people who need to learn about this disease and learn about just lifestyle management, and that's what it is about.
How has this evolved through COVID? Because obviously, a lot of attention, like you said, even from a business perspective, you pivoted heavily towards the digital side of things. I'm sure even the attention towards this information being shared digitally must have sort of increased quite a bit, considering also health has been this huge conversation for the last 9 to 12 months, right? And immunity and hygiene and all of these sort of things have just sort of erupted out of nowhere.
So this is what I used to talk about at all times when I started, and people used to turn their heads away and they said, okay, we know this stuff, yeah, we have to eat healthy, we have to manage our stress levels. And it's so funny how, COVID hit and all we have is our immunity. And everything that we spoke about initially just, holds true. And we just started putting all that content out there. What we did was we started with this free ebook, because what I realized is that Now the world was talking about immunity, and there we had, every single human being talking, giving their advice on how to improve the immune system, and that's wonderful. The intention is wonderful, but it was coming from very uncredited sources as well. People were giving their points of view of how to eat healthier and whatever, but they really didn't have the credentials to give that information, especially for chronic diseases, especially for cancer. So we decided as a company that specializes in cancer care that let's put out the right information. So we created this very comprehensive ebook that would tell you all the ways that you can look after yourself through COVID and how to build your immune system, so on and so forth. From that, it evolved to, providing a lot of information online, Samara Sets videos, so on and so forth. And today we're about to launch 2 new products, actually, digital products. They're toolkits. So one is a cancer prevention toolkit, and the other is a cancer essentials toolkit. And these toolkits are nothing but an end-to-end comprehensive package of all the information you require if you want to decrease your chances of cancer, or if you've got cancer and what you can do. So there you have specialists in cancer care giving you the right information. It's a really low cost product that you can buy online, and you don't really have to look anywhere or go to any uncredited sources, but you can get all your information from there. So what it's done for us is definitely re-established what we were always saying initially, and screaming the top of our lungs initially, even with doctors. Actually, I was just talked to doctors, and a lot of them used to just kind of sideline me and be like, yeah, we agree. But today doctors come to us and they say, can you talk to our patients about the immune system and how to manage their lifestyle? And it's also evolved into us creating more educational content and products to provide to our customers and our patients.
Amazing. Could you just sort of give us a hint to where one could find these toolkits, and especially the free ebook you mentioned? I think that could be a useful resource for some of the people listening in.
So if you were to just go to our website, which is careforcancer.com, you will find all the information over there about the toolkits and the ebook and everything. You can even go to our Instagram page. We get a lot of people reaching out to us through Instagram, and that's of course Care for Cancer.
Great. So quickly moving on, I wanna talk to you about the sort of public impression of health in general in India right now. You mentioned, I guess we're both familiar with how India, while growing up, the culture of health and sports and all is sort of scattered across these super extremes. So you're either an athlete when you're younger and then you care about all of these things, or you're totally not, and it just sort of becomes something you address as you grow older. And unfortunately, more often than not, most people end up addressing it only when there is a problem. Once you discover that something's wrong, you're just trying to sort of find an ailment to that problem or disease or any of those things. And obviously, that's now changing because as a country, I think the burden of this sort of lifestyle that we lead and the waiting till something goes wrong is obviously not a very balanced way to approach it. Could you tell us about how effectively is it being managed in India right now, both in the public and the private sector? And if so, what are things that people should be keeping an eye out to manage their personal health better?
So you more or less hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what India was about and is about. We have a very reactive approach to healthcare. We always have. When something happens to us, we're ready to do everything possible, do the bypass surgeries, take the chemo, whatever it might be. But we won't do the preventative measures, right? And if you compare us to the West, there is a much more proactive approach to health. People keep themselves healthy and try to, mitigate these chances of actually getting chronic diseases. That is changing considerably. And in terms of even the private and public sectors and the health facilities that are out there, you see much more focus, and I can say even packages that are available to patients to do preventative checkups, to do much more services that are tapered towards preventative healthcare and preventative, measures that one can take in order to make sure that they don't get any kind of disease. So that's in the sense that they are more economical now. Their insurance is covering a lot of it. So insurance is looking at services that we provide before providing clinical nutrition or physical therapy for a patient was never considered something that an insurance company would cover. But now we're talking to insurance, and now they're looking at covering these kind of costs of these integrative therapies that patients can take to prevent certain diseases. So that's a huge change that's happening. Even with even with patients themselves and people out there themselves, just the change of how people are reaching out to us personally, saying, tell us what we can do. So say last year we were dealing with cancer patients, and all their focus was on curing or giving care to that loved one. Today when we deal with a cancer patient, the entire family comes to us saying, what can we do? We don't want to get the cancer, so can you help us in actually keeping our risk low? What are the measures that we can take? So that's a major change that's happening. The thing is that, so India is a very price sensitive market. No matter what you do, people, whether it's healthcare or anything, people are very conscious of, spending their money. So the facilities, the therapies, the products, the services available in healthcare is becoming more accessible through a digital platform, and is becoming way more economical. Again, I can give you an example. When a patient would take one of our therapies, where they say they took the entire package, which was providing nutrition, physical rehab, psychological intervention, all of that in their homes, it would be about 60 to 70,000 rupees per month. But today we provide it at 30,000 rupees. So there's a massive change in that. So, healthcare is becoming more affordable, and there is a major transition that's going into preventative care that we are noticing.
Yeah, that's really good, and obviously reassuring to know also that the state of healthcare overall is an evolving space in India. And it's interesting you say that the price, for example, is almost halved. And at the same time, the situation of one person in the family suffering from an ailment or being diagnosed with something makes everybody else sort of come together and be like, hey, what can we do to avoid another situation like this? What are those changes that can be made? I'm sure there's like trends and innovations within the sector that are leading to these sort of things. Do you think there are any specific trends that apply to the case in point in India? Like, is it the internet and all of this information being shared? Is it just this growing influence of wanting to be healthier?
So I think it's a bit of everything. I think the biggest transformation has been obviously the access to information. I think that's really made a major change in the way people are understanding health, and they're understanding what's happening in the medical fraternity, and that's why questions are being asked, and that's why they want more information before they go for a treatment. So I think it's access to information, and just having the ease of accessibility also present. Obviously, there are more tiered now. Information being available to tier 3 cities as well. With the click of a button, people in smaller towns and villages are accessing information. So that's a huge change. But it's also, again, people understand, and that has obviously created more knowledge, in the sense that they're starting to understand that chronic diseases can be prevented, and it's a lifestyle management system that needs to be in play. And if they really make those changes with lifestyle, they can really prevent or decrease their chances rapidly, or substantially, I should say. So when people are realizing that, they are then taking the measures to keep their chances low. A lot of people now are noticing that, every family in India probably has a diabetic patient, a heart disease patient, or a cancer patient in their family. So they are noticing that, and then they are taking these measures. So the number one thing is just accessibility to information. That's what's really made the change.
Okay, nice. That's good to know. I also want to touch upon the bit you mentioned, where in India, obviously, the trends of healthcare have always been, sort of reactive to finding out that something may have gone wrong and now needs to be addressed. So, how does one transition from that state of looking at health as this reactive measure to now being taking a more preventive approach and trying to lead a lifestyle that ensures that you have a lesser chance to be diagnosed with something like cancer in the first place? Are there any easy sort of entry level points that people can start with already?
Yeah, so it's, as I can talk from what we are doing, right? We are using lifestyle therapies to help a patient recover from cancer from a very medical scientific standpoint. And it has proven now that using these therapies are actually helping patients recover much better. They're decreasing their relapse rate. They're taking to treatment better, so on and so forth. So we realized that if this we're using lifestyle to help a patient recover, and if cancer is more or less a lifestyle disease, then why can't we use these lifestyle therapies to actually decrease the chances of cancer? And so we created a cancer risk assessment, where anyone can take this risk assessment, and it would tell you where you lie in the spectrum of your susceptibility to cancer. And then we tell you exactly what you can do to bring your risk down. So just the adoption of that has been huge through corporate enterprises, multinational companies, where they want to provide this to their employees, because they are paying a lot of money in terms of claims. And cancer, it still might be a smaller segment or market size in comparison to, say, heart disease in India, but it's a very expensive disease. So obviously, corporations and enterprises and companies are very interested in uh, including certain measures for their employees to make sure that, okay, if we can bring these risks down, it can really save us costs in certain things. So that's one segment. Also, just yeah, this the adoption of taking these risk assessments and then taking our therapy. So we started providing cancer prevention therapies to people. Started with the caregivers of patients, and now just a lot of people just reach out to us directly, saying that, listen, I don't feel good, I know something's up, and can you help me, can you make me get back into a healthy lifestyle. So and it's as simple as just making a change with your food, with your physical state of being, and definitely very big part is your mental health. So lifestyle is more or less food, body, and mind, and that's basically.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, like you rightly said, a lot of this needs to come from within also, and the want to live a healthier lifestyle and take preventive measures. Um, Great. I think we're going to pivot real quick to another sector, which is obviously pivotal, integral to your work, which is collaborations within the sector, right? Because obviously, healthcare, as much as it is a personal experience for a lot of people, it's also a global conversation. It's a national conversation. There's the private sector, there's the public sector, there's all these different things. Even like you mentioned, corporate infrastructure can also play a role in it. So it's quite an interesting space in that sense. So do you envision opportunities, or maybe there are already opportunities that we might not be aware of, for collaboration between, say, the governments, private health sector players, consultancies, like sort of small and big players coming together to sort of make a change, and also possibly through the lens of Australia, considering they have amazing infrastructure in place for the health, with obviously much smaller population numbers and a higher standard of living. Are there sort of opportunities for collaboration there, or are the things already happening between the two countries?
Yeah, of course, there's opportunity because you have a country which is very developed in the sense of healthcare and integrative oncology. If I had to speak for what I'm doing, and then you have a country like us, like India, that's moving in that direction. So just creating easier accessibility to these kind of healthcare institutes, making it easy for patients in India to probably get healthcare from Australia or vice versa. Also, a big area that I see could be another massive change, and I'm noticing it again with them actually approaching us, is pharmaceutical companies. And there are major pharmaceutical companies around the world, even based in Australia. These guys are reaching out to us saying that, we need to create more patient engagement platforms. We can't only depend on the doctors anymore, and we understand we provide a drug, but it cannot only be commercially driven. So, in fact, very interestingly, I can't tell who, but they are starting to take us as consultants in terms of teaching their company about how to be more patient centric. So I think, say, the governments or healthcare institutes or these kind of players in the medical fraternity just needs to become more patient centric, needs to make accessibility to healthcare much easier. And I think we're already moving in that direction. Like how I spoke about insurance and how suddenly teleconsulting the regulations on teleconsulting has improved tremendously. A prescription, if I believe, provided through a teleconsult is now considered, valid and credible. So those kind of things, accessibility to and fro from between countries, and accessibility to high skilled medical the medical fraternity in Australia, who can provide their consultancy services to the Indian population would really, really be helpful to us. And if we take medical aside, even and we also look at lifestyle and we look at improving our lifestyle, we also have therapies that we have evolved in and that can also, help Australia as a country as well. So we can provide the same therapies to them. And like an example would be, as simple as something like yoga therapy. So if I'm not mistaken, in Australia, they have made it almost compulsory for every oncologist to prescribe exercise to all their cancer patients. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it is mandatory now. Yoga therapy, there have been multiple studies that have proven that therapeutic yoga can really help improve a cancer patient's outcome. And we have some of the best yoga therapists in the world placed in our country. And if we can make that accessible to, say, patients in Australia, yeah, I think just ease of and accessibility of therapies of each country.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think like you rightly mentioned, the collaboration can work both ways, and there's definitely a lot to be exchanged between the two countries if you look at just the health and wellness sector. Uh, but there's also, obviously, there are challenges around doing so. In some cases, the last year or so, with the pandemic, has made it very, very clear and apparent that there is no better time than now for countries to come together and work together to solve these problems, because something like a COVID-19 has affected literally everybody. It's not exclusive to any one country or any one demographic. Have you been able to identify with your work any challenges that prevent from the ease of this sort of collaboration?
It's still in the early stages. I mean, we're still not there yet. But honestly, Tejas, I think we're really moving there in a very fast way. Just having as simple as just having these massive, some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies reaching out to us saying that, listen, we have been in the business for decades and decades, but we've not done something right, and we need your help. As simple as that. And these pharmaceutical companies are placed all over the country. But I think where there's still, obstacles is obviously the fact that we need to make healthcare more affordable. Cancer is still a very expensive disease. The average person in India is not able to afford it. They sell their home, they sell everything, and they use their life savings to even get through that few rounds of chemotherapy. So we're still struggling with that, and while it might be a long stretch and a long road ahead, I think the change can only happen through education. So my biggest focus is that we need to educate everybody. And the way we need to do that is to start, first of all, I truly believe that the education system in India and probably around the world, but I'm going to speak for my country, is pretty archaic. It's not, personally, I wouldn't be comfortable sending my child to school because of the way, the education system is running. And we need more relevant curriculums that help a student get through and understand what they're, and really educate themselves about what they're in for when they come out to the real world, And one of the major things is health and wellness. We need, so I feel that the government and things like that needs to start inducing these kind of curriculums and making the education system more in shape of what is required today for people around the world, and gearing up people. So even with what I'm doing, one of the things that I will move in the direction towards is actually creating curriculums for schools. I've already started doing that. I did a small short series for a beautiful foundation that is educating 100, girls from through college from rural areas of India. And they said, you know what? And they are teaching them life skills. And I said, can you come on board to teach them the the healthcare part of it? And I said, absolutely. And that's what needs to become mainstream. So sure, healthcare needs to be more affordable. Sure, all of that has to happen. but the change, the ground level change, is going to happen through education. And the way that we can do this is the support of the government coming and saying that this has to be mandatory. The curriculum has to change of the educational institute.
From everything you've said so far, I get the strong sense that for you, it's also very important to take account of the fact that we are still talking about a very human problem. Right? Health is a very human problem. Cancer is a very human problem. There are emotions. There's, it's a life and death situation for some with their own liabilities, having to sell their house, make tough choices because of the money. And so on. So it needs to be treated with that respect, of course, and the powers that be, whether it's the governments, whether it's institutions, large pharmaceutical organizations obviously need to come together and try and work together, keeping in mind that, these are real people, these are real lives. And it's great to hear from you that obviously it's moving in the right direction. It might be early days still, and there's a long way to go, of course, but it's definitely very heartening to hear that, it is moving. Through the practice at Cara, what are the next steps for you and the team within this space, and what are your immediate sort of focus points? Considering obviously the last 11 months have been so unique of a problem for everybody.
So, now when people ask me, so what is your 5-year vision, 3-year vision? I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know what my 1-year vision is post COVID, right? Like that has thrown us off. Um, so, so it's very important as an entrepreneur and as someone who runs a startup to be very adaptable and to change quickly and make rapid changes with the way the market is changing and your industry is changing. And that's, of course, holds true, or you can see of what has happened. So what we did, like I said, transform completely to digital. The next step for us is to make preventative care very, mainstream. Of course, our focus is always working with cancer patients, but I want to push the prevention space as well. I want to work more with pharmaceutical companies, and instead of going against these guys, the most important thing is to work with them. So if they want to make that change, then using the medical fraternity, like the major healthcare institutes, pharmaceutical companies, insurance, multinational companies, work with them and start making that change for prevention and for those who have cancer as well, and making it more of a human approach and really using lifestyle to help prevent or treat a cancer patient. Um, but but one thing definitely holds true for me, and the direction I move towards is, again, I know I'm kind of like repeating myself, is education. So whether I create courses, curriculums, even as crazy as build a school, I don't know. Yeah, I want to do something that would teach and inform and educate people. When it comes to healthcare, knowledge is power, and this is where we have to, really put all our energy and teach people. So even like this small little thing of educating these young girls through college and just teaching them about small little human problems that they have, like hormonal imbalances and how to eat healthier, even if they live in these rural areas, and what they can do for hygiene and self-care and so on and so forth, can really help them. And there were a lot of things that they learned and they started implementing, and I was teaching them for a couple of months and I saw those changes with them. So this is where I would like to head towards. I don't know how it would play out, but we want to use a lot of educative material to put out. So today it's coming out as toolkits, it's coming out as videos through Samara Says. I don't know, tomorrow it might be a school. Let's see.
Wow, that sounds incredibly exciting to know the opportunity within education within the sector, right? And a lot of this education needs to happen at a grassroots level. Even if it starts small, the ripple effect can obviously reach a long way further. And speaking of education, I also want to talk to you about, obviously it's been quite some time since you were in Australia studying and you've had your experience, but considering healthcare is now in this insanely huge limelight where it's become the most important conversation globally, there's inevitably going to be a surge in young kids sort of stepping out of the junior education system, moving into their higher education, exploring pathways within healthcare and what kind of advice would you give someone trying to enter this space, going to a country like Australia that has the infrastructure to educate themselves and come back and help build a better, more well prepared infrastructure in India?
So, if they're going, if these are people who are interested in going to a country like Australia, then it's about really learning what's going on out there, exposing themselves to what's already working, and then taking that and then shaping it to the Indian market. That's more or less what I did as well. I went to the US, I learned about integrative oncology and the way it's structured over there and the way it's functioning over there. But then when I came to India, I completely changed it towards what India requires. So I think people who want to dive into this space, first of all, it's Australia would be a fabulous country to do that because they are leaps and bounds ahead when it comes to healthcare. So expose yourself to what's there and then bring that back and shape it to the Indian market. So to one is to fulfill a need that is present in India, but also with also trying to bring in create a need that is required. A lot of people don't realize that they have a problem till you actually show to them and say that, you know what, you didn't realize you have this problem, but we're going to solve it for you. So doing a bit of both, basically. So yeah, so I would say just expose yourself to what's out there because you have access to one of the countries that is way ahead, and then and coming back and finding out what can solve that problem here today.
Okay, amazing. I think this has been an amazing and extremely informative chat for myself, and I'm sure for everybody tuning in. It's been great to hear your experiences and understand your work a bit better. Thank you so much, Samara, for joining us on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Tejas. It's really been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for having me.